So Notion just introduced a brand new feature called database buttons. It lets us click buttons in a database row and performs actions with that click. This feature is a nice addition to the buttons function that Notion launched last year. In this video, I will go through a really interesting and practical use case using Notion's new buttons feature, Notion Buttons, Formula 2.0, Notion Automations, and the status property to manage a workflow. I created a simple YouTube projects tracker that has 5 subtasks for every YouTube video, from idea and research, story and script, producing the talking head, which I call as A-roll, producing supporting video, which we can call as B-roll, and editing the entire video, and finally publishing it. The purpose of this tracker is to time track and status track this project from start to completion, but with minimal clicks as possible. This project is merely illustrative, and you can change the steps to anything that you can relate to, whether it's a work project or a student one. So to complete this database, we're going to add some fields. We'll keep the default name property, delete the tab, and enable sub-items as a property so that we can add subtasks to the YouTube project in question. This enables us to collapse the project tracker to the project level or to break this down to the task level. Next, let's add a checkbox property. Call it select row, which we will need for automations. We'll then add 2 new database button properties by clicking on the plus sign and looking for the buttons property in the database. One button is called the start button and the other will be the completed one. We'll come back to configuring it in the next step. Let's add a start date and an end date, which are date properties. We need a formula property called duration, which we will use to calculate the number of days, the hours, and the minutes between the start date and the end date. We'll also need a person property to mark who marked the task as complete. If we are working in a team, you may consider a responsibility property, similar to the person property. We'll have a standard status property, which has not started, in progress, and done as different statuses. And we will have 2 checkboxes, which are called start clicked and completed clicked, which I will explain later in the video. Now let's define the project. When you add a new project, a new YouTube project, you just click on the plus new button at the bottom of the database table. To make things easier, I added in a Notion automation such that when a project is added, the start date is picked up with the now property and the date and time is stamped automatically. But the projects need to have tasks, right? Which in this case are these 5 tasks that we highlighted earlier, from idea to publish, adding Notion's button automations. The buttons are configured exactly in the same way. So I'll just take you through the idea and research button. So when you click this button, then a page is added to the sample YouTube projects tracker, which will have the description, idea and research. Now because of Notion's automations, I've configured that as soon as a new page is added, the start date for the task is automatically added as well. Now this is created as a project, and you can just drag the task from the bottom of the project to the project in question. Similarly, to change the status to in progress, if necessary, and back to not started, I added 2 buttons. This is an edit button, where for each of the selected rows, it will change the statuses. To create this, I defined the edit pages that match one filter, which is the select row is ticked. The action would be to mark the status as not started or in progress, as the case may be, and uncheck the ticked select rows after doing that, so that you're ready for any other next action. Now it's time to define the Notion database buttons. The configuration is similar to the Notion's buttons automation that they launched last year. The start button basically has 2 functions. One is to edit this page and add a start date to now and check the checkbox called start clicked. So the objective is to make sure that you know that you've clicked the start button. The completed button does more things. It marks the row as done in the status, adds an end date as now, adds the completed by, which is the specific person who is clicking on this button, and marking completed clicked checkbox. So when each individual clicks on the completed by button, that gets updated simultaneously. Now we're left with the formula property called duration, which is really interesting. So in duration, we calculate the duration of the project between the start date and the end date in days, hours, and minutes. So we're going to be using two formulae from the Notion Formula 2.0 list. One is the if statement and one is the let's variable definition. Under the if statement, we want to keep this property as empty if there is no end date and fill it up with the following formulae should there be an end date. Let's helps you define multiple variables. We are going to define D for days, H for hours, M for minutes, and print the result in the formula. So D is defined as a simple date between the start date and the end date in days. H is the number of hours left after deducting the number of days in 24-hour increments. M is the number of minutes left after deducting the number of days in minutes and the number of hours in minutes. Since the variables have already been defined, the calculation becomes really simple. The result is a concat formula with days, hours, and minutes, followed by a D, H, or M symbol and a space in between. If you want to see more buttons configurations, watch this video around Notion buttons. That gives you incredible insights into how to take advantage of the Notion's buttons feature. And if you want to know more about Notion Formula 2.0, watch this video.